Hi everyone, and welcome to the Back 40 Feet, where we talk about suburban, urban, and patio gardening. And today I'm going to talk about water. In fact, watering. You don't give it a lot of thought about how we water, but it really makes a difference to the life of the plants because water is life. The easiest thing, let's start from most easiest to more complicated, would be just a watering can, which is great for patio gardening because you can control how much water is going into your containers. Watering cans are great too because if you were doing any fertilizer, like some compost tea or anything like that, you could really know how much you're mixing in, which is very helpful. You can also make sure that what's really important when you're watering is you want the water to get to the roots. So if you have a watering can, you can really direct where that water is. And you can also have more control over how much force the water is hitting your plants so that you're less apt to damage your plants. So that's the easiest thing. Next up is the handheld hose, the good old mister or sprayer, whatever you want to call it. A lot of times here in Massachusetts, we end up with watering bans, and even though we have a lot of rain compared to a lot of other states, the way that we store our water, it's also the drinking supply. So when we start to have a dry summer, they start to put on watering bans, and one of the first things that they do is they say handheld watering devices only. So that means your spray hose or your watering cans. First up, if you're going to water your plants either with a watering can or with a handheld sprayer or even a sprinkler, do not water in the direct sun. This is a huge mistake that people make all the time. So if it's a beautiful sunny day and you water your plants and there's water sitting on your leaves, they act like magnifying glasses. And now you get what's called sun scald or sun scorch, which ends up little brown or yellow patches all over your plants. They got sunburned because you just put a magnifying glass on top of them in the bright midday sun. A friend of mine had called me once in a panic because he had been tending his cousin's beautiful rose garden. And it was a really hot summer, and every time it got hot, he'd go over there and spray the roses in the heat of the day to cool them off. And they fried, the poor things. And his cousin was coming back from his vacation. He's like, what am I supposed to do? They look horrible. Well, I can't fix it. You burn them, and you're going to have to wait till the foliage comes back. You weren't watering them right. So it's really best to either water early in the morning or in the evening when the sun isn't at its peak. Me personally, I prefer to water at night because there's no risk of the evaporation of the water that I just used, and it gives more time for the plants to absorb the water and recover, and I don't have to worry about sun scald. But once I start to get a really dry summer, or a really hot summer, I sometimes will water early in the morning so that the plants have water so that they don't get dehydrated during the day, just like us on a hot summer day, and then I'll water them again at night. So when you do a handheld device, you really have to think about how long you're watering because it really just gets very surface, and I'll show you that in a minute. The other option that you can have are sprinklers, so you don't have to sit there and hold it, and you can put the sprinklers on timers. And one of the reasons that towns that do watering bans like mine don't like the sprinklers is that there's a lot of evaporation of that water when it's kind of getting thrown through the air, and it's not very water efficient. If you're in an area that if you got your own well water or you don't have watering bans, sure, it's a lot easier, and you just need to keep an eye on it, move it around so you don't end up with puddles and some areas not getting any water. My preference for watering are soaker hoses, and what those do is they're hoses that have holes in them, and you keep them just installed right there on the dirt, and when you turn them on, the water drips directly into the soil, so there's no loss. And the other advantage of these soaker hoses is that you don't have to worry what time of day you're watering. I mean, obviously I'd prefer not to water in the middle of the day because I'm just going to end up losing a lot of the water to the heat, but I don't have to worry at all about sun scald when I'm using the soaker hoses. So here I just used a handheld hose with a shower head on, and this dirt looks nice and moist, and there was some nice standing water, but watch this. If I go in here with my hori and look how dry that dirt is below there. That you can just see that it really is just surface water. So it doesn't go down very far, maybe half an inch to an inch. So this is why it's not particularly efficient. What you could do is water for about 5 or 10 minutes, let the soil absorb it, get the soil surface tension down, and then come back and re-water, and then you're going to end up, instead of this dryness, you're going to get a lot better absorption. So I'm going to do that with my handheld hose as I'm trying to prepare my beds for planting. What I've done to make my watering more efficient as I'm preparing my garden bed is I did 5 to 10 minutes with a handheld hose, let it sit for 10 minutes, and then came back and did another 5 minutes. So now let's see what the difference is. So if I take my hori hori here, which is my knife, and look at that, it's all the way down. So I'm going further, I'll just keep digging. All right, I'm well past 6 inches in, and it is still nice and wet soil. And that's why it's really important that if you are going to do a handheld hose, that it's a bit more efficient to just try to water it and then come back and re-water. Just like you see flash floods and you wonder why that happens, it's because dry soil has a high surface tension and the water just runs off. So letting it get moist first and then watering has a much better effect than just a one-time water. This is an example of a soaker hose, and I have this all throughout my metal garden beds here and threading around so that pretty much everything is going to get a uniform amount of water, and it's much more efficient than the handheld. If you do soaker hosers, I would strongly recommend you to install them before you plant anything.